Hello dear friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Colleen, and if we haven't met before, you're very welcome and I'm delighted to meet you, and if you're returning, thank you so much for supporting me. I have been planning a new journal that I'm going to do, which I'm not going to talk about right now, but for that journal I needed to create some collage papers, and I wanted them on a sort of a semi-transparent paper. So I have myself here a book. Now some of you are going to be horrified by this, but I got this book in a charity shop who was actually throwing it out because it had no cover. It had been badly ripped on some of the pages. And I am a believer, and it is a Bible that was being thrown out. I've used this extensively for ministry purposes when we've had events to be able to use this, and I'm continuing to use these verses of scripture in my journals, but just in a creative way. So forgive me for those of you who might find offense with me using this, but this was actually literally going into the bin, and I said to the person, could I give you a donation and take it? So that's what I'm going to be using today. You could however use something like a dictionary page or something from an encyclopedia, but essentially what you're looking for is something that is a nice firm quality paper but actually is a little bit sort of transparent. And I have underneath here, I have a couple of laminated A4 sheets. This is just white paper. You can see I've been busy working, and I'm using these with my paper underneath. Well, I'm putting these under my paper because I just find it a lot easier to work with. The first thing I'm going to do is to just discuss with you some of the tools I'm going to use. So I've got a little spritz bottle of water. I have some water brush pens here. I've got a larger one and a smaller one. And I have a set here of watercolors, which I will be using, and some distress spray stains. And also a little bit later on we're going to use some archival ink with some stamps, and I will show you the stamps a little bit later. So the first thing I will do now is just to prepare the paper, and in order to get the paper to settle onto the backing of the laminated sheet, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a spritz of water, and I find that that works quite well for me. Now when you come to actually color the papers with these watercolors, you can do any kind of technique you want to. For those of you that have never used a little water brush pen, you've got water in here. If you squeeze it, the water comes out onto the bristles and then will allow you to wet your paint. So for argument's sake, oopsie, I'm just going to take, for instance, let me take this ochre here, and I'm squeezing out the water, so that's becoming wet. It's now picking up on my little brush, and I'm going to just randomly paint a few little areas with this color. I'm probably going to use 3, maybe 4 different colors within a certain palette. I'm trying not to get it too busy, but you could, if you wanted to, do something like a rainbow effect. This one I'm going to stick to slightly more muted tones. I'm now going into a brown color here, and because I've wet the paper and because I'm working with watercolors, the paints that I'm putting on are going to want to move. So I'm not too fussed about the patterns that they're making. I'm just wanting them to move. Watercolor, by its very nature, will always dry lighter than what you see on the paper. So for argument's sake, this section here where you can see the edge is quite dark, or this section over here, is going to dry considerably lighter. I'm just spreading some of this to the corners, and then I've got another brown here. I'm just going to use some of that. It's got a slightly more orangey tone to it, and this will just be what I use to work on. You could try all sorts of different things with this. I'll show you some that I did earlier when I've shown you how to apply this, where I did them in different patterns, and that could be part of what you plan out for your work. But this exercise is really lovely just to sort of free your brain, give you some play space, for want of a better description, just so that you can relax and enjoy what you're doing. And as you progress through the different steps of this, you'll find that it actually gets a whole lot more interesting, and your work will start to look a little bit more sophisticated. At the moment it looks a bit like child's play, which it is, but it's nevertheless really good fun. If you squeeze on your water brush as you're working, it'll obviously release more water. If you don't squeeze and you just use the water that's on your surface, then you will get a slightly dry effect. Now, the advantage of having my paper on this backing sheet of the laminated plastic is that when I want to make space on my table, which is going to be very soon now, I can actually pick the paper up on this piece of plastic and I can leave it. I do like to have a couple of little white areas in some of my work, not always, but in some of the work, just so that I have a little bit of contrast, and it just adds another dimension to it. So having got that settled, got all the pages colored, I'm not worried if the paints move around. That's absolutely fine. I'm just going to set this on the floor to dry for a minute or two. I'll show you another one with a different colorway, just because it is quite interesting to see the different colors. And for this one I'm going to use blues and greens. You don't have to wet your paper if you don't want to. This is just my preference because it just helps it to just lie flat here. You might have some paint left on your brush, in which case if you don't want that to transfer, just pick up another brush, or you could actually just leave it and let it be part of your next design. Right, so I'm going to start to pick up some of my greens. I've got a few different greens here. Just spreading these around. How's your week been? We've had a really hot week here. Oh my word, and on Monday they started the introduction of a hosepipe ban, which not a lot of fun when you've got a large area to water. So that was a challenge, but fortunately, because I'm on a commercial farm, we are allowed to use a fair amount of water to water our raised beds, because obviously they're crops and things that we're growing. And the other thing is I work with special needs adults, so there's a small reprieve there, but it's not always as easy as it was if you could just put the sprinklers on. Anyway, I'm going to cover my page with color. I'm getting my greens on first, and then I'll introduce some of the blues. There's another green there, slightly bluey color, isn't it? I love the drippiness of watercolors, and with watercolor, just be very aware that it's unlike acrylic. It doesn't have a binder in it, so if you were to come over it with something wet, the colors could shift. So it is something that you'll need to just be aware of if you're wanting to do other techniques on top of this. I don't mind the colors moving myself, but it might be critical to what you're doing that they stay in place as they were intended. Right, I'm going to introduce some of my blues. And this is quite a strong blue. And so if you look at your color palette here, I've got green, which is made up of blue and yellow, and I've got blue, and if I wanted to, I could add a third color in here, or a third range of colors, and to me that would be the yellow that I'd go for. So when you're using your colors, try and think of complementary colors, like purple and yellows go opposite each other, or you could use colors that you would use to mix red and blues to make purples, just so that your designs on your pages don't get too much messy. There is a tendency always to put too many different colors around on, and then you end up with a sort of a muddy effect, which is not always pleasing. I used to find that a lot when I was teaching, that people would mix all the colors together. Right, I think I will introduce a little bit of yellow just to sort of highlight some of this. So I'm going to use my towel, and that's why I'm working on a towel, just to clean this off. It's going to wash out when I put it through the washing machine, so that's absolutely fine. And I'm going to take some of this lemon yellow here, because that's quite an acid color, and it's going to react quite nicely with the greens to give me quite a bright green. I mean, sorry, with the blue to give me quite a bright green. So let me just add some of that in there. So I'm actually creating a different green by adding this in. I've spent a bit of time today playing around with this, and it's been really great fun indeed. Right, remember that this bright color is going to dry lighter, but you can see how it is just lifting up the color that's already on the pages, creating a little bit of vibrancy. So I do love color, but I keep saying to myself, less is more, but I do love color. I've just been making a quilt for one of my grandchildren using really quite bright colored pieces of fabric that I had left over. In fact, I'd been given them when I was at my quilting group back home, and it was just a bag of scraps somebody had given me, and I've made so many quilts out of this bag of scraps I can't tell you. But this one's got stars on, and I have done some videos on it because there are some people that have been shown an interest. So I can link it in the description box. You can have a look at the quilt. But the top is finished now, which is lovely, and as it's starting to, oh well, hasn't started yet. I hope it's going to start to get cooler as we head into autumn now. I'm going to haul it out because I'm going to start to sandwich the quilt together to be able to quilt it. And I do all my quilting by hand. I just find it's nice to have it on my lap, and I can sit and watch a movie or chat to a friend. Whereas a machine quilting, I don't know, it always just struggled. It was like fighting with the things the whole time. Right, so that's about as much as I'm going to do, and I'll show you this when it's dry, because you'll be surprised at just how much lighter it's going to be. But you've got some interesting patterns, and where these creases have formed and you've got these little ridges of color, that's going to add into the texture and the design. You could pull the page flat if you wanted to have a more even color. You can wiggle this around to get the paints moving a little bit more just by moving them up and down. That's entirely up to you, but for this I'm setting this aside now. Now I'd like to show you some of the others that I've done. So this one I did just using blues and greens and yellows, pretty much those similar colors, you know, that sort of blue and a lemony yellow, and I just used my brush and I just sort of twirled it around like that. So I've got a random kind of picture and colors there, but that's quite a nice background. This one I did using stripes of colors, so I used earthy tones, the browns, the reds, with a bit of yellow just to give it a pop. This one also I did with stripy tones, but just in a different orientation, and that one as well. And this one I used wet paper, and then I used 3 distress spray stains just to spritz onto them. So I used those 3 colors to spray on, and that's given me quite a nice sort of soft background there. It's probably a little bit more subtle than the watercolors because you're not seeing brush marks as much, and you've got that sort of mottled effect that you get from the splattering of the brush, of the spray nozzle. So I was very happy with that. Then our next step will be to do some stamping on these. Which one should I do? Let me do this one. Right, so I'm going to show you the technique of stamping, and then I'll show you a whole lot more that I have got. I've got a set of stamps here that's got some wildflowers on. Oopsie, it's a new one, so I haven't used it before. But that's quite pretty. So here's me showing it to you in its plastic wrapper so you can't see it because of the reflection of the light. Silly me. Let's get this out. Right, so we've got some pretty wildflower designs. You'll see that they're quite small and compact, and that's going to be quite nice to work with. So I'm going to use this one. I'm using archival ink because it's acid-free, permanent and waterproof. If you use a pigment ink, you're going to find that if you work with other mediums on top that are water-based, you might find some of the ink spreading from the stamp pad. So just be careful of that. So let me get a little stamping block. And I'm going to keep this fairly simple. I'm just going to do a couple of rows of images to make strips. When you use stamps for the first time, make sure you just can see all the ink on the stamp, because often the stamp hasn't been seasoned yet, so it's not going to absorb all the ink to begin with. And I don't mind if the print isn't 100% accurate, it's fine. Oh, that's printed out quite nicely. Right. So you could build up almost like a Tim Holtz collage paper if you wanted to with this. I'm just going to do this particular one in strips, and I'm going to do them with different strips of wildflowers and grasses so that I could use them as a belly band, or I could use them on a tag, or perhaps even just down the side of a page in a journal. I have got a bit of stamping here because I used this underneath something else that I'll show you just now, but it doesn't really matter. Right, so that's the first one that I'm doing. Love how that's come out, it's really nice and delicate. And then I've got some with lovely grasses. So once I've got the ink on here, you'll be able to see this one a little bit better. Yeah, so that's quite a nice design. I'm going to turn my page around because this will give me a nice border here. And I'm going to stamp this across the page. You could, if you wanted to, just because this looks really nice, is just do this as a top and a bottom of a page. That would also be quite interesting. But I just, for today, want some strips. When you get to the edge like that, you can just do half of the stamp. And then I'm going to do a row in the middle. And I'm going to keep these quite wide strips. So let's just ink this last one up. So I'm going to stamp this through the center. I find working on this tile also is quite nice when I'm stamping because it allows me to press in quite easily. And this is a tile that I've had for years, actually. Just use it all the time when I'm painting. And when I'm gluing, strangely enough, I use this tile as well, because if I get sticky, it doesn't make the surface sticky, and I can actually just carry on. Right. So because this particular lot of stamps are fairly solid, as opposed to a stamp which has open areas, I'm not going to do anything further with this other than just to give it a minute or so just to dry. You can normally tell whether your ink is dry by tilting this to the light, and if it's still shiny, it'll be wet. Actually, this one looks pretty dry. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a ruler and I'm going to just line this up using my text as a guide, and I'm going to tear this into strips. So I've got that, which would be lovely for a border of a page. I could cut that into smaller pieces. I could wrap it over one page onto the next page, and I will do the same here. Isn't that lovely, huh? There we go. That's gorgeous. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on stamping, but I will show you some of the things that I have already stamped, and then I'll talk you on to the next step that I do. Right, so this particular piece of pinky red colour I sprayed using the Distress Spray Stain Lumberjack Plaid onto a wet surface, and I only did one colour because I kind of felt it might be quite nice as a Christmassy kind of theme. I've got the stamp set here from Dovercraft, Little Red Robin and Friends. I'm not sure if it's still available. I think I might have got this at the Range or at the Works, I'm not sure, but all I've done here is just to stamp that all over the page with the 3 kind of borders here, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did previously, is just tear this into strips using my text as a guide. So that I've got collage fodder waiting to be used. Right, so I've now got 3 individual pieces here, but I could make a lovely tag using that Christmas tree. I've got a nice little hedgehog there, which could be part of a tuck spot, little robins, all sorts. So I've got that as well. Then I went big and bold. I went very bold, in fact, and I had this lovely piece of yellow and browny colored paper, and I stamped these clocks on. Now, I'm not sure that you'll be able to get these here because I bought this in South Africa, but I'm sure you would be able to get a clock stamp. And I've just simply stamped these large pieces all over the place. I like the fact that there are lots of circles. I like that there's interesting things inside. So let's try with this one, just tearing a slightly narrower strip and seeing how that looks. There we go. That's quite nice and interesting. It's almost a bit like a washi tape, although that will be nice and easy to glue. So we've got that one with the lovely clocks and things on. And then I will show you what I do with some of the others as well. So for argument's sake, this particular piece of paper, when I was applying the color to it, I painted them in irregular sized blocks. And then I used a whole lot of stamps just to stamp all over there, and used a text stamp just to kind of link everything together with a few postal stamps. These could obviously be used as blocks, as backgrounds. They could be used as focal points, or again just torn into strips. Then if you move on to the next stage, you will have something like this where you've got your stamp page, and the black on itself can be quite hard. So what I've done with these particular ones is I've actually taken my water brush and I have just added a little bit of color to some of these designs. So I've got this one here that I'm going to do, and the color makes all the difference. I think I'm going to do this one with a red or crimsony color, just because it will contrast nicely with the yellows and things here. I'll just dilute this color with a bit of water here, and then maybe just add in a little bit of, what shall I add in? Maybe a brighter yellow. So I'm applying paint on top of paint, but I'm not really applying enough water to move all this color around, but it is just lifting it, and it is actually making the whole thing a whole lot more interesting. It's just a really fun way to create some collage fodder. I have some blue over here which I haven't repeated anywhere else, so I think what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of this blue and maybe put it onto this postal stamp here, just around the outside circle. And you don't have to be that accurate. Now that just ties that. So here again, if you're going to cut this up. You could use a section like that by using half the pages. You could use strips across, and that's just really, really interesting. Here is another one that I've done where I've colored it. I've used bigger, bolder stamps for this, and again, by adding the color, you can see the contrast between that and the colored butterflies, just adding a lot more dimension. So I'm going to go now and make up a few little things to show you what you can do with these, and then I'll come back and put the camera on. Before I cut these all up and make things, I just thought I'd just give you a quick preview of what they look like when they've been torn into strips. You'll see that they don't look as big and solid in your face because the designs have been made into smaller pieces. And I just love the colorways of these, and I love the way that the stamps have played with the text on this. Really, really chuffed with these. And as I said, it's just been a wonderful way to play and just spend a creative afternoon where I haven't had to really build anything but just have fun splodging color on and stamping. But as I promised you, I will just make a few little things, not many, maybe 3, just to give you an idea of what you could actually do with some of these as ephemera for your junk journals. Okay, so I've got a couple of quick ideas which I think we can make together, just to show you what you could do with your ephemera. So I've taken this wider strip of paper, the folders in the middle, and I thought I could make a nice little booklet with it, because if I was to fold this in half, that would look rather nice on the front of a book, and that would be the back. So I'm just going to use my ruler just to tear this. And I have taken some coffee dyed paper that I had from an old diary, which has got quite nice, I think they call it faint lines, F-E-I-N-T, if I remember correctly. And I'm going to use that. I might need to just trim them down a little bit. So that will be the front and the back of my little journal. Got 3 pieces of paper here. Let's fold that in half. We'll do it this way so I don't have the number on the front. Oh, that will go in perfectly. So I'm just going to use a staple here, and I've got my good old stapler, and I'll probably do it from the top to the underneath side so I have that closure on the inside. And you want to just make sure that you do get it on the line so your book lies straight. So there we go. One nice little booklet that can go quite easily into a tuck spot. And you have some verses of scripture to be able to read in amongst everything else, which I know is contentious, but I'm trying to do the right thing with the word. The next thing that I thought that we could do would be to cover this edge. So when I've got a lot of scraps, I just will sometimes sit and stick them all together and make bits and bobs. And I've got this card that I've made that's not particularly interesting, but it's got a clock there, and I've got this strip of clock paper. So I thought if I ran a little bead of glue down both sides, the front and the back, I could actually glue that on to the edge, which just gives it a bit more definition. And I could use it as a tag, I could round the corners, and I could put a ribbon in. So I'm going to do that quickly. And we'll just slide this on. I want to be able to see this little bit of a die cut border that I had, because it just gives it a nice little focal feature there, and it's got a bit of white. My purple glue is going to dry clear, so I'm not worried about that, and I'll just tear that off, and it's just sort of brought it all in, and I can round the edges if I want to. Difficult to do when the glue is still wet though. So we've got a little booklet, and we've got that which could be a tag. The next thing is I'm going to actually make a little tag, or it could be a journal card. So this was a little place setting that I got in a Daphne's diary, and I've cut it up. So I'm going to put some glue onto the front cover because I don't need it, and that will give me white at the back for journaling. Right. And you can now decide what you would like on your card. I think I'd like that butterfly wings, so I'm going to push it towards the edge of the card like that. And do I want this over? Right, so I think what I'll do is I'm going to tear it off at the top here. I do quite like to have sometimes my colors going over to the other side, just to sort of link everything together. So I'm just going to fold this over rather than tear it off. Right, so there I've got a nice little interesting journaling card, and I have a lovely little, well, another one of those little place settings, and I thought I could actually create this into a tuck spot. So I don't really want to cover the whole thing, so let me see what I could put onto here. That is a little bit different. Should we do something a bit Christmassy? It lends itself. Oh, what if we do a tree on here? We could do that. Okay, so I want to make sure that I get the tree onto the card, so I'm going to use the soft paper just to bend the paper, and if I tear it off around about there, I should be fine. So I'm going to glue this front of the card down, or maybe just a little bit more. This is a good way to use sort of scraps of card that are lying around, or even things that you've made that you think, oh, I really don't like that anymore. You can use them up like this. So I'll stick that down like that. Flip it over and tear this off. And I'll tear this off over here. The bottom piece is going to be a bit tricky to tear, so I think I'm just going to grab a pair of scissors. I'll have to do this little edge here as well. There's no harm in using scissors if you want to. Alright, and I think just to be able to cover this all completely, I might let's just see if I've got something else that would be more appropriate for this edge. Yeah, let's do that. So I'm going to cover this side as well, just in case I have it so that it can come out of a tuck spot, but I could use it as a little pocket, but who knows. So because I don't know what I'm going to use it for yet, I'm going to just cover the whole surface. And tear this off. And tear this off. And from here onwards you could really go to town. You know, you can play around with your ribbons, you can put brads in, you can put eyelets in with your crocodile and your punch, you can ink up all the edges, but this is just a little start of some things that you could use. So if I was to glue this a little bit down the sides or even stitch it, I could create a nice little tuck spot to put my little card of, or my little journaling card or my little booklet in. And so there we've got it, one little booklet, a little tuck spot, that could be a tag, and that can be a tag. Simple ideas, just made with this fun collage paper. I hope you've enjoyed being with me today, just for a few minutes of fun together, and thank you for your continued support. Bye for now.